Ouch.
Mortal Kombat, one of the most beloved fighting games ever made in the video game industry, cultivated by ones Ed Boon and John Tobias. A fighting game franchise that took violence to the absolute extreme, with such finishing moves such as the X-ray attacks and the heavily gruesome yet satisfying fatalities, filled with a unique, diverse roster of characters based upon their personality traits, their fighting techniques, and their established backstories. Even the first installment was so vicious that it was one of the key games that eventually led to the creation of the ESRB rating system during the 1993 hearing for video game violence. Now, I myself wouldn't personally declare myself as a diehard of the franchise, but I would say that I am quite the fan of it. I have played older arcade classics before, such as Mortal Kombat 2, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and even newer installments developed by NetherRealm Studios, some of which are really good despite their flaws, and the other that jumped the shark for the franchise in the same way that Halo 5 did for the Halo series. But Mortal Kombat itself is no stranger when it comes to Hollywood. Aside from the straight-to-DVD released animated film made by Warner Brothers themselves entitled Scorpion's Revenge, Paul W.S. Andersen, the same auteur who would eventually tarnish and desecrate another video game franchise by the name of Resident Evil, directed the very first Mortal Kombat movie, a film that wasn't the best video game film in the world, especially with its story and its visual effects, but it did have a small share of promising and entertaining aspects about itself, such as the characters and the fight sequences. Its sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, on the other hand, while indisputably one of the worst movies that I have ever seen, is also one of the most unintentionally funniest comedies I had ever laid my eyes on, containing some of the most baffling action sequences, visual effects that rival the Langoliers in terms of quality, and dialogue that obliterated my sides with laughter.
Father, the merger has begun. Earth is under attack, and it is glorious!
A third film for this IP has been in the works since 2001 and has been stuck in development hell ever since, with changes in the storyline, the casting, and directors and crew members constantly coming and going. But it wasn't until years later that it was announced that Mortal Kombat will return to the big silver screen yet again, but as a full-on reboot and made by a first-time director known as Simon McQuaid, starring all of the characters that you know and love from the video game, except Johnny Cage, which I will get to later. And the best part is, we finally get to see the classic fatalities at their goriest. Now that does sound like a formula to appease the fans of the video game franchise while also becoming the best video game movie ever made. And we all understand that the vast majority of video game movies have been extraordinarily terrible. I know, shocking stuff. But there is always a chance that even the most imperfect video game movie can still be entertaining or solid in executed practice. But with the case of this flick, seeing how I saw it on HBO Max, and seeing how I have been anticipating the release of yet another Mortal Kombat movie, I left not just with the feeling of devastation, but unadulterated rage and frustration. Mortal Kombat 2021 is not just an atrocity of a video game movie, but it's an absolute insult to the franchise that spawned it, from the perspective of someone who is both a fan of Mortal Kombat and a fan of movies in general. But to truly figure out why this video game adaptation is an absolute garbage fire, we have to discuss the plot. Earthrealm has lost 9 out of the 10 tournaments in Mortal Kombat, and they must win in order to prevent Shang Tsung and the rest of his Outworld combatants from invading Earthrealm. And all this will be accomplished based upon a prophecy saying that the world will be saved by the ascension of Hanzo Masashi's bloodline that being amateur MMA fighter Louis Tan as Cole Young. Dragged into a situation that he doesn't want to be a part of after being ambushed by Sub-Zero, he encounters Sonya Blade and Jackson Biggs, who explain to him through very tedious exposition that he has been chosen, much like Jax, who also has a mark, for a tournament that has been waged for generations as a way to decide the fate of the realms established by the Elder Gods. As the group, including Kano, meet up with champion Liu Kang, his cousin Kung Lao, and the God of Thunder and protector of Earthrealm himself, Lord Raiden, they must train and defend themselves from the sorcerer Shang Tsung, who vows to cheat and kill them all before the tournament commences. Yes, Mortal Kombat 2021 is not about the tournament, as Earthrealm champions chosen by Lord Raiden have to fight for the fate of the universe against Shang Tsung and Outworld's threatening ruler Shao Kahn, as it is about the setup for the tournament. Because nothing says setup for a tournament like this movie's bad attempt at franchise maintenance. So before we send this movie to the Netherrealm itself, how about a bit of redeeming aspects about the film? I have to say that the first 10 minutes of the movie, including the climactic showdown between Hanzo Hasashi and Bi-Han, are the only thing I cared about, and perhaps what I consider to be the best parts of the entire movie. The opening of Bi-Han and his fellow Lin Kuei assassins going in to murder Hanzo's family and the rest of the clansmen of the Shirai Ryu tribe are well directed, showing how merciless the Lin Kuei are, as well as itemizing the origin of how Hanzo Hasashi becomes the Spectre of the Netherrealm, Scorpion. Joe Taslim's collected and menacing demeanor as Bi-Han is pretty solid, especially when he is face to face with Hanzo's family, and Hiroyuki Sanada's performance as Hanzo Hasashi is very good, encapsulating the compassion and fatherhood aspect of his character and the rage, focus, and vengeance whenever all hell breaks loose during the ambush. On top of the fact that both of their action sequences together are well choreographed. Due to both of these actors being trained martial artists, everything from the hand-to-hand combat sequences, the swordplay in the frozen gem, and even Sonata's fast pace and brutal reflexes of the kunai are tremendous and stand out from the rest of the film's action sequences, even if one of them heavily does rely on the use of CGI blood. Now then, let's talk about the rest of the film. Now look, I understand that this film is called Mortal Kombat, but it feels like the filmmakers were much too focused on the over-exaggerated gore and violence than actually taking the time to develop the characters and even construct a cohesive narrative. But Luke, Mortal Kombat is a fighting game. Who goes into a movie based around a fighting game for the plot? Well, fictitious cinephile on the internet, the Mortal Kombat IP is layered with lore, characters, and factions that are incredibly important, yet interesting to understand. However, if the execution is good on its own while also respecting the established canon, then all will be forgiven. But that just isn't the case. And you know what? Let's talk about the characters for starters. The characters in this movie are flat and unlike who they are in the games, heavily relying on exposition to introduce themselves, explaining the plot, telling us what something is, the rules of the tournament, and even backstories and aspects about their character to make themselves more likable than they actually are, because show don't tell it is a big no-no for the writer of Wonder Woman 1984, and the performances even range from mildly tolerable to lifeless and even god-awful. Let's begin with what people state as the best character of this entire movie, Josh Lawson as Kano. I'm sure that he is having fun with his role, and he is probably the only one in this movie, shockingly, with an amount of levity in his line delivery. But Kano is an absolute joke of a character, meant to be this very cunning and ruthless mercenary who, as leader of the Black Dragon, caused several problems for his rival Sonya Blade, and even murdered numerous soldiers from the Special Forces while also having a laugh about it. In this movie, this threatening arms dealer and murder for hire gets reduced to a pathetic punchline and one-liner dispenser. Some of which is him calling Liu Kang David Copperfield because he shot fireballs out of his hands, or even calling Liu Kang Magic Mike because he doesn't have a shirt on. Yeah, this is what the filmmakers call comedy. Believe me, there are more of these unfunny one-liners where they came from. Not to mention that as a guy who is notorious for all these horrific acts that he is known for given his status, he cannot fight with the darn and is only competent when the plot requires him to showcase his deadly abilities. Even Cabal, one of his fellow Black Dragon members, says to him, "You used to be someone to fear." And as I was watching it, I said, yeah, I thought so too. But then the script happened and he's nothing but a liability and a loose cannon. He even has this random fight with Sonya Blade because he wouldn't give her the GPS and the coordinates to Raiden's temple like they're freaking toddlers fighting over a toy in the sandbox, and because Sonya doesn't have the Arcana sigil, which she can easily get just by killing Kano, who she has no reason to trust, just for the sake of conflict. I'm not even kidding. This actually happens. Somebody wrote this in the final draft. And even if you have never played the Mortal Kombat games, his heel turn against his allies is such a total no-brainer, and the film doesn't even try in its script to give him like an ounce of redemption or even second thoughts as he's reverting back to his old ways. Ludi Lin's performance as Liu Kang is like a charisma black hole. His line delivery is stale, and nor is he as likable or well-rounded as his prior iterations. He serves nothing but to spout exposition for the protagonist, including information about himself, the information about Mortal Kombat, how to find their inner Arcana, and we will get to that eventually, while also training the chosen champions for Mortal Kombat, including a mercenary who did not deserve the dragon mark to begin with. Mehcad Brooks as Jackson Briggs and Jessica McNamee as Sonya Blade perform their characters inadequately, as they either overexploit information that we already know or do idiotic or convenient things for the sake of the plot. And speaking of heel turn, the villains in this movie are just as poorly defined, wasted, and nonsensical as the rest of the plot. Some of these villains who are characters from the games that fans adore and care about, such as Natara, who's the queen of the vampires, Cabal, a Black Dragon member who reverted back to the good side to fight for Earthrealm, Reiko, Emperor Shao Kahn's intelligent general, and Melina, the Tarkatan-Edenian hybrid experiment and the quote-unquote sister of one of the most popular characters of Mortal Kombat, Katana, are rendered jobbers and non-threatening miscellaneous villains for the heroes to fight. It seems kind of upsetting for a lot of fans, seeing how the treatment of these characters that they admire are quite embarrassing. If you're going to make Shang Tsung's Outworld henchmen jobbers, then why doesn't he have jobbers and just have the writers use the popular antagonists from the games wisely? Not even the Shokan Prince Goro does anything noteworthy or show his superiority by eviscerating his challengers, much like how he is presented in the 1995 version. In MK 2021, he is not only a glorified cameo, but as a one-dimensional and horribly looking CGI monster for Cole to defeat. He doesn't use his strength to disembowel him, and even at one point, where he has Cole in his hands, he doesn't make him holier than Mortal Kombat 11's plot, and instead roars at him, only to get distracted by Cole's family. And then you have Chin Han as the ancient sorcerer Shang Tsung, the awfully set-up villain who lacks the intimidation and the slyness of his video game and his 1995 counterpart. He doesn't have a solid introduction to establish that he is a menace to be reckoned with, and not to mention that his plan is just plain stupid. His diabolical scheme is that since Earthrealm has lost 9 out of the 10 tournaments of Mortal Kombat, he plans to go after the chosen ones for Earthrealm and kill them before the tournament begins. Doesn't Tsung realize that killing Earthrealm's defenders before the tournament begins doesn't grant him the right for him and his Outworld flunkies to invade Earthrealm, like, at all? Shang Tsung assumes that the Elder Gods will be too lazy to stop him from eliminating all of the chosen fighters for Raiden and claim victory before the tournament. Also, he has admitted to Melina that out of the 9 times that Earthrealm lost, they followed the rules that were established by the Elder Gods, which means that Shang Tsung has cheated out of those 9 times. So why hasn't Shang Tsung been caught by the Elder Gods? Yes, he has stated that conflict outside of Mortal Kombat is not forbidden. However, particularly attacking and executing the chosen ones for Earthrealm in order to increase Outworld's chances would not be something that would be deemed acceptable. Or better yet, why doesn't Raiden do his job and prevent him from doing these sort of things? Oh, Raiden says he can't interfere according to the rules, even though he interfered to activate a shield around his temple to protect the heroes, and intervened by transporting the heroes into a void when they were getting overrun by Shang Tsung's henchmen, since Raiden himself is literally one of the protectors of Earthrealm, and also, in the lore, he is not an Elder God. He is a demigod. I'm serious. This is in the script. And that's not to forget the horrifically dreadful dialogue. Auditory and literary dreck that felt like it was written by a freshman college student who fails to understand the basics of human language. From characters delivering dump truck loads of exposition, explaining the world building, the rules, the backstories, instead of having the viewer experience it themselves so we can relate to the protagonists more. Poorly written dribble like, Kano. Kano who? Kano, none of your business. To even the crowbar lines that reference the video games that do nothing but cater to the fans and in execution are incredibly awkward to listen to. Examples include Kano after beating a creature says, Kano wins. Who says that in third person after a fight? And Kung Lao or Liu Kang, after winning an opponent, says fatality or flawless victory. They literally serve no purpose other than to say to the fans, hey, remember this line? Now, reverting back to the characters, despite him being athletic in the real world, Louis Tan as Cole Young is not a good actor. His line delivery is stiff, wooden, and unconvincing, especially when he's talking about saving the world with his wife before he leaves to go find Sonya, whenever he isn't able to find his inner power, and we'll get to that later, or hatching a plan to save the world as all of the iconic characters get to play second fiddle to this boring, vacuous character. He is nothing but a self-insert avatar for the audience to identify with as he communicates with the established icons of the video games just to gain information for the average moviegoer, as well as getting himself overpowered magical abilities. It actually gets to a point where he literally, no joke, spawns literal plot armor from his daughter's string bracelet, which makes him absorb damage like Black Panther, but except of expelling out that damage to other attackers, it manifests into bladed tonfas that have absolutely no relation to who he is as a character. And here is one other character that I have saved for last, and it's something that I am more than happy to talk about. Where's Johnny Cage? You know, one of the main reasons why Earthrealm won the tournament and plays a major part of the franchise. A guy that starts off as a self-absorbed Hollywood actor that takes nothing seriously but in a funny and humorous way, but still is loyal and helpful to his teammates, and he matures throughout the story while also maintaining the same charm and likability. Well, producer Todd Garner stated himself that the reason why the film replaced Johnny Cage with Cole Young was because he felt too uncomfortable having a white male kind of lead to be the main character of a Mortal Kombat movie, and that he was going for something more different, diverse, and true. Need I remind him that Liu Kang is the main character of Mortal Kombat and not Johnny Cage, and also Mortal Kombat already has a diverse roster of characters. So yeah, Johnny Cage is replaced by a literal plot device who shares the same lineage as the best character in the franchise as a cheap way to get you to like him, as opposed to, you know, I don't know, liking him on his own merits. But here's perhaps the biggest element of the movie that absolutely derails itself. That would be the introductory aspect of the Arcana. The Arcana is not something that is mentioned in the games. It is a completely original idea from the writers, which would be fine if the mechanics of the Arcana and how to achieve it are consistent. They aren't. How the Arcana works is that if you have the symbol of Mortal Kombat, you are chosen to fight in the tournament, and to defeat your opponent, you must achieve your Arcana, also known as the power that you hold inside. Liu Kang, who got his powers from killing a child trafficker, even states that you can earn it by training. You can gain it from the soul or what drives you. And he states firmly that pain is the ultimate catalyst. The problem is that the Arcana happens so randomly and sometimes doesn't even come up until the plot requires that this specific moment happens. Kano gets his Arcana of a laser eye because he got angry and his ego was challenged. Sonya got hers by defeating somebody and didn't even train when she acquired her powers. Jax doesn't get his Arcana until his arms are removed, and Cole got his from birth and until his family was being in danger. Some of these aspects aren't even related to fighting and happen so unnaturally and conveniently just for the sake of the plot. Wouldn't it be much more plausible, authentic, and simpler if instead of this Arcana nonsense, you would have Liu Kang acquire his fireballs by using his inner chi after training with the White Lotus, or Kano having a cybernetic eye because of his encounter that he had with Jax, or Sonya just by developing energy bracelets that she built herself. And when Earthrealmers are chosen, they are given an invitation as opposed to having to kill someone to gain a mark that looks like a cattle brand. And for a movie called Mortal Kombat, the fight sequences are massively uninspired. Whereas the Mortal Kombat movies, and heck, even the Mortal Kombat games, had characters with a versatile range of combat skills so they were distinguishable from one another. Here it just feels like average mixed martial arts action sequences that are bereft of awe or energy. Apart from the Scorpion and Sub-Zero combat sequences, they are devoid of intensity or excitement. The choreography is incredibly stilted, poorly staged, and awkward, such as Jax's match with General Raiko as they're fighting on the pit stage, which is basically a bridge with spikes poking up from the very bottom of the bridge, or Cole, Sonya, and Kano's fight with Reptile, where the cast spends most of its time pretending to be tossed around or hit, since Reptile can turn invisible at any point. Not to mention the terrible editing that occurs when Sonya is spinning in slow motion because the movie wants to be cool, and Cole tosses her a knife and she abruptly lands on her 2 feet in a quick cut next to Kano and stabs Reptile. No, I'm not kidding. And yes, the fatalities are violent and gory, but none of them are earned at all. In fact, some of them are pretty unsatisfying, seeing how the vast majority of the fatalities that occur only apply to Shang Tsung's allies, who are basically just jobber versions of their video game counterparts. And it gets worse with the apocalyptically abysmal visual effects. I've heard from certain reviews that this movie's visual effects are much more improved and much better than the 1990s Mortal Kombat visual effects. And while yes, I perfectly agree that this movie's visual effects are much more improved from the 1990s versions that looked absolutely atrocious. However, saying that doesn't mean anything, because when comparing it to other films with similar budgets or less from this or the last decade that looked completely marvelous in comparison, Mortal Kombat's special effects and compositing are still appalling to look at. From Reptile and Goro's hideously unconvincing monster design, to the abominable effects and compositing of Scorpion as he's teleporting to the Netherrealm, or Liu Kang holding in fire while he's meditating as it looks like something that you would see in an Adobe After Effects tutorial, to even Raiden's protective barrier around his temple that even you could see the pixels on if you look closely, and not to mention the obvious green screen work of Sub-Zero walking across Shang Tsung's bridge. In addition to the CG, the production design is laughable. Whenever you aren't surrounded by abandoned buildings or gyms in Gary, Indiana, or cheaply made sets that look like something off of the CW, such as rooms in Raiden's temple where half of it feels like it was shot in front of a green screen, and the other that felt like there was no imagine put into the structure, the design, or the art direction. And there is a moment, I kid you not, where Jax is following Sub-Zero into an abandoned building because Jax is a smart guy as opposed to, you know, driving away with Cole and the rest of the family. And the room that he walks into is filled with stalactites and stalagmites, and they are entirely made of plastic. I don't even know why they even bother putting in these noticeably dodgy props. They could have just had Jax walk inside of the building and just feel cold temperature. You would also be captivated by rocky valleys and deserts, each of them looking more blandly shot than the last. Even when you get to see this movie's version of Outworld, where the only thing different about it from any location on this movie are a indigo and brown color palette, with the Shokan statue in the background and Shang Tsung's throne, which is basically a giant bridge that is hanging out in the middle of nowhere and is the kind of design that would collapse if it was compromised by anything. The costume design is also pitiful, some of it looking like it was lazily designed, such as Liu Kang, Reiko, and Sonya's outfits, and even Cole Young's plot armor design. Uncomfortably bulky, such as Sub-Zero's costume, or extremely busy for its own good, such as Shang Tsung's outfit or Raiden's robe. And sometimes it looks like subpar cosplay material, such as Kung Lao's outfit, or Cabal's tattered clothing and plastic mask that would have looked cool if seen at Comic-Con, but in a movie with a budget of $50 million, looks unacceptably ugly looking. I already know that some of these people who are watching this video right now are probably fans of Mortal Kombat, and they will probably like this movie and say that it's a movie that was made for the fans. I am a fan of Mortal Kombat, and this movie felt like I was being pandered to by forced, manipulative, and nonsensical fan service. From showing a picture of Nightwolf, to showcasing items in Raiden's temple such as Katana's fan, or Shinnok's amulet, which by the way, what the heck is that thing doing in Raiden's temple out in the open? This is one of the most powerful items to one of the most menacing villains in all of Mortal Kombat, Shinnok. Yes, an evil elder god. And you are using that as an Easter egg? Moving on. A graffiti mark that reads "Down Forward Light Punch." The cringe-inducing dialogue that were brilliant in the video games and greatly executed at that. And not to mention that this decade's version of Techno Syndrome is remade through the power of dubstep. With all of this talk of which Mortal Kombat movie is the best one between the 1995 and the 2021 version, both aren't good, but at least the 1995 version took advantage of its $20 million budget on its practical effects and its production design, and has characters with competent chemistry, and a main character we can care about as he goes against a villain that relishes the competition while having a blast performance-wise. This Mortal Kombat is the kind of movie that dangles keys in front of your eyes like children, only to snatch away what you love, while also not giving a crap about the characters or the source material. But what? It has Easter eggs, references, fatalities, and over-the-top violence that the games were known for. While the gore was the one thing that made Mortal Kombat popular, It was the substance, the characters, and the lore to keep fans and fighting game enthusiasts coming back for more. And it says a lot when I and many others care about this universe more than these filmmakers who wrote it. In fact, I'm not even sure if I covered all of the problems with it, because this film is quite the freaking pile. As a Mortal Kombat fan, as a fighting game fan, as a movie fan, Mortal Kombat 2021 is an abominable cash grab of an adaptation, the likes I haven't seen in years since Hitman Agent 47 and Tomb Raider 2018. Disingenuous, half-hearted, soulless, and manipulative to the nth degree, pretending to care about the source material while introducing new ideas that fall flat on their face and produce more problems than ever. This isn't an adaptation. This is an obligation to capitalize on the success of the video games. If you want to watch a movie wanting nothing more but to see over-the-top martial arts action with bloody mayhem, watch the Raid movies, or play the good Mortal Kombat games. They're a million times better. They are more entertaining and worth your time than this insipid, soul-sucking nightmare of a video game reboot. Alright guys, so that was my review of Mortal Kombat. If you like this review, please like and comment below what you personally thought of the film yourself. You'll also find me on media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and if you have a phone, you can find me on Instagram. And as always, if you'd like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must consult the Elder Gods about this filth. My name is Nukem, and Mortal Kombat 2021, it's official. You suck!